The cough of old floor polish and bleach thickened the air in the hospital corridor. I stood, 21 and trembling, near fading family photographs taped to the wall with curling masking tape. My mother's voice cracked sharp, strained with anxiety as she tugged my arm. "Hernan, do you hear yourself?" she said in fast, quiet Spanish, trying not to draw the gaze of the nurses gliding past. "Your abuela can't afford more bad news, and your father, he will explode." Her grip was firm. I could see 3 of my cousins crammed into battered vinyl seats down the hall, their attention caught between the beeping alarms from abuela's room and our argument. The faint click of a doctor's shoes reached us, then faded. "It isn't bad news, Mama," I said softer, my voice quivering in the spaces between us. "I auditioned for the company, the National Ballet." She cut over me, her panic laced with anger. "Dance again, all your life with this? You think this is what the family sacrificed for? You'll end up broke here or off somewhere, dirty clubs, nonsense places." She uncrossed and recrossed her arms, eyes darting toward the closed door behind which Abuela slept. My uncle Oscar joined, heavy with sweat and a stained delivery shirt. "He wants to throw his life away, let him. At least he won't drag your hopes along, Hermana." He shook his head, looking as if swallowing bitterness. I stared down at the faded linoleum tiles. A faint heel mark ran in a slow loop, thin as a pencil line, some other visitor's anxious pacing. I could hear my own blood thick and loud in my ears. "I'm going to do it," I said so quietly I almost surprised myself. My mother's eyes shone, not with excitement but with something deeper. She took 2 breaths, willing herself not to cry. "Hoy no, Hernan," she whispered. "Today of all days, you do not embarrass us with these childish hopes." She turned, walking stiff-backed back to Abuela's room. The waiting room clock, a cheap plastic disc stuttering forward every minute, ticked on. My feet felt nailed to the spot. The cold of the tiles leaked up through my sneakers. I told myself to breathe, but all that came was silence. For the next 5 years, every step I took through Buenos Aires was colored by that scene. The corridor, the fluorescent hum, the weight of my mother's words. It marked me like a bruise you keep pressing to see if it still hurts. The reality of chasing dance in Buenos Aires is this: the city throbbed with dancers but bled them, one by one, into disappointment. I slept in spare rooms, bartered shifts cleaning mirrors in studios for a few extra hours of practice, took slaps of criticism from teachers whose patience was scarcer than funding. A part of me learned to speak with my body what my mouth could not voice at home. Music started as distant thunder under my skin, trembling down my arms in that corridor, and now, in the studio, it became a storm. I learned how to draw joy from pain, from the tight ache behind my knees at midnight, from the sound of rain that held me upright while my toes rebuked the floor until they bled. Outside, the city was a mosaic of neon, honeysuckle, trash, and promise. The nights bent under the strain of drunks and lovers, each block a small stage, each window catching a half-dreamt version of myself reflected in shadow and light. The city didn't care about my ambition, it never had, but I loved it in all its indifference. People from home, the Reavers, cousins, neighbors drifted into town sometimes. I heard their laughter from a distance. My cousin Soledad once caught me coming out of a backstreet rehearsal on Cal Sarmiento, flushed and tired, with my socks tucked into my waistband. Her look was a mixture of surprise and pity. "Bailerin now," she said, lips twisting as she tucked a bag of groceries closer to her chest. "Such a useful life, you run from family or from work." I shrugged and kept walking. It hurt less that way, grinding the humiliation into my soles. Sometimes the doubt was louder than the music. There are days you wake and the city is just a stranger with sharp teeth. You carry on anyway, feet dragging, because to stop would be to die. They were wrong, though, not instantly, but enough. Little by little, the city heard me, a small solo in a student showcase, then a crowd of 50, then a residency with a choreographer whose praise was as rare as decent coffee after midnight. I tasted success like something tart and dangerous, afraid to have too much at once. Every performance was a kind of defiance. I moved not with arrogance but quiet fury, each gesture carrying the memory of my mother's silenced hope, my uncle's mocking voice. Eventually, I was not just a dancer but a choreographer, 2 arms and hands carving out stories older and sharper than words. By the time I was 28, people began walking up after shows, faces flushed with disbelief and delight. "That duet," strangers would say, grabbing my hand, "how did you learn to make us feel that?" Night after night, I stood blinking in the stage lights, refusing to weep. Each curtain call was another grain of forgiveness, slowly eroding all the bitterness from before. Years passed. The letters from home came infrequently, marked with requests for money, birthday signatures, sometimes just silent updates about who had died or married. Never a request for a ticket to my shows, not once, but the company grew and so did the dream. One winter, a reviewer from a national newspaper called me one of the most necessary voices in contemporary Argentinian dance. I read the headline with shaking fingers, then called no one. Then an invitation came. The Teatro Colón, sacred marble halls, giants of tango and ballet stamping their legends into the velvet. My work was to headline a new season. Fame is a strange companion. It pads behind you quietly, then suddenly it crushes you. There were interviews and features. A television crew trailed me for a week. I walked the corridors of the company in the dawn blue, both awed and terrified, remembering the hospital's cold light and my mother's face drawn tight with fatigue. They all heard about it, I know, because my aunt, my mother's sister, rang late one evening. "Your cousin says you're to perform for the president?" she asked. I could hear wind slamming against her window. "Yes," I said, weighing each word as if it might crack. "We didn't think you could ever, that's good. You should tell your mother." I hesitated, voice catching in my chest. "Will she come?" She was silent, the phone line threading our histories. "She is proud, Hernan, but she does not say, 'I will try.'" Show week blurred into one long exhale, lights, sweat, trembling hands fixing costumes, raw petitions whispered between dancers in dressing rooms that smelled of hairspray and nerves. The night before the premiere, I walked the stage alone, feet bare on the smooth boards, tracing the choreography in the dark. The city flashed outside the windows, indifferent and spectacular. On opening night, the marble foyer of the Teatro Colón gleamed, gold leaf and velvet everywhere, as if it had always waited for this kind of moment. I smoothed my hair in the reflection of the window, found my name printed above the title of my show in black, serious letters. The audience was thick and bright, the powerful, the influential. I found my cast huddled in a corner, trembling like colts before a race. Just before call time, I slipped backstage and peered through the heavy curtain. For a moment I saw only strangers and clouds of perfume, but then there in the fourth row my mother, back straight, hands locked together. My uncle Oscar beside her, not leaning away, not muttering, just silent, his eyes pinned to the empty stage. Rows behind, a knot of cousins sat, looking awkward in borrowed suits and dresses. Had they come together or were they drawn separately by the rumor of scandalous success? I didn't care. I closed my eyes for a heartbeat. Resolve settled into my spine like steel. I belonged here, in this space that had once been reserved for miracles, not for the likes of me. When the curtain lifted, I stepped into light so pure it scoured every other memory away except for movement, breath, and music. We danced not just for applause or acclaim, but because this, finally, was the truest language I'd ever known. I let the city's heartbeat run through me, every fight, every sleepless night, every sting of shame between then and now. The show wasn't perfect, but in the moments that mattered, it caught fire. The solos blazed, and in the duets there was tenderness raw as bone. Silence fell as we finished, thick and alive. In it I felt something shift in the audience, something old unravel. Applause started scattered, then rolled into thunder. I stood in the light, watching seats empty as people rushed the edge of the stage, their faces pale with wonder or disbelief. After the bows, I barely made it through the backstage crowds before the call came over the intercom, a request for me to meet someone in the green room. I pushed through costumers, musicians, journalists, feeling again like a boy in a hospital corridor. Inside, the green room glowed with soft golden lamps and the buttery hospitality reserved for important guests. My mother stood there, awkward, shoulders squared as if expecting a blow. My uncle beside her, hands jammed in his pockets, his jaw tight. The silence was full of things unsaid. I stood in my sweat-damp shirt, trembling as if I'd just sprinted the width of the city. Finally, my mother spoke, eyes never leaving the little tray of biscuits laid out for guests. "That was you," she said, as if confirming a fact she'd been afraid to trust. "All of that, every movement, you made it." I nodded. "I did. All of it." She tried to say something else, but her mouth trembled. She pressed her hand to her lips instead. My uncle finally looked up, face redder than I'd ever seen it, as if ashamed not just for all the years of dismissing me, but for something unnamed that lived between fathers and sons, even if he was only my mother's brother. "That was real art, Hernan," he said at last. "Not a dream, not foolishness." I pulled a chair closer. The harsh lights made every flaw visible, the lines beside my mother's mouth, the exhaustion lingering behind her eyes. Without practice, she picked at the hem of her skirt. "I was scared," she said quietly, "that if you failed, you'd never come home." I reached across, taking her hand. Her fingers, smaller than I'd remembered, twitched like the hands of someone learning a new language. "I failed over and over," I told her, "but look, I am here." She pressed my hand to her cheek. "I am sorry, Hijo." It was enough in that moment. The apology resting in our joined hands was heavier than applause. A knock at the door. One cousin entered, then another. Mori family, faces glowing with uncertainty. They fussed with programs, stammered congratulations, eyes shining. For a long time the room was filled not with noise but with the thickest, most alive kind of silence. Nobody quite knowing what could or should be said, nobody quite able to release the guilt that clung to our histories. But there it was, all that mocking, all that skepticism, all the impatient dismissal, sitting useless in the shadow of something undeniable. Their eyes, wide and wet, saw not the ridiculous dream but the living proof written across my body, the discipline of my posture, the grace that sang from years of work and pain. I led my mother by the arm through the marble halls, our way lit by gold sconces, watchers stealing glances at the woman they now knew had raised a prodigy. My family trailed behind, awkward and proud, their voices rising at last as we stepped out into the city's nighttime bloom. Later, back in my apartment, I sat alone on the edge of the bed, untying my shoes with slow, aching fingers. The old posters on the walls, a younger me in battered rehearsal gear, torn ticket stubs from first auditions, looked different. Less like childish fantasy, more like the steady climb home. That night I lay awake a long while, watching the headlights sweep across my ceiling. For the first time in years, I did not rehearse old arguments, did not carry the hot stone of rejection in my chest. Instead, I pictured my mother's face in the green room, half disbelieving and half ashamed as she held my hand. Success isn't applause or even recognition. It is the moment when your silence is finally understood, when every doubt you absorbed hardens not into bitterness but into a kind of quiet grace. I closed my eyes, the city breathing outside, and found that I could finally sleep, home in every sense of the word.